how's everyone going, church? Come on, it's all right. You can talk to me, it's okay. I noticed that nobody's taken my challenge and used the front row, but maybe for next week somebody will, come on, someone's got to do that for us. So I just want to share where we're going to be the next couple of weeks and what we're going to be doing while the boss is away. A few months ago, I don't know if you remember this, but it was actually about 4 months ago, I preached a sermon that was just a one-off, just to sort of fill in a week, and it was about complaining and about how I'm convinced that the people of Israel, in their journey out of captivity into the promised land that God had promised them, can teach us a lot about their attitude, and particularly our attitude, and the stuff that we get wrong and that they clearly got wrong. And I think that's useful for us as we transition from our slavery into sin into our promised land in heaven with Jesus. We will, over the course of our lives, just like that little video there, have little intersections where we have a choice to make. And the choice will be we either trust God and believe that He's with us and that He knows what He's doing, or we get stuck in somewhere that He doesn't want us to get stuck in. And we're going to have them day in, day out for just for the rest of our lives, I think. And I talked last time 4 months ago, I know, about complaining, and it turns into this little cycle that just goes around and around. And before you know it, it just becomes a lifestyle. And then every complaint we have and everything we go on sort of has this way of getting directed at God. Do you know what I mean? And so that's not a place we want to get stuck at. Today, I want to continue and see what happens next. I just want to go on this little journey for a couple of weeks in Exodus and see what happens next. And today is really about how these people deal with change and uncertainty. And it must be overwhelming. It must be hard. But this is what they've got to. This is the challenge they've got to do. Next week, like Nathan said, David Collins will be here. Next week's our Mission Sunday. And just to let you know, if you're new and you're just trying to figure out who these missionaries are, next week there'll be like a video from each of our missionaries explaining what they do and how the church supports them, and just that sort of thing. We want to encourage you to come along, and also like Nathan said, the challenge before us is to give sacrificially about the equivalent of a day's wage towards missions. And just to let you know that as a church, this probably fits about half of our missions budget comes from this weekend. So it's a big deal, okay? So we want to encourage you to come along and be part of that next weekend. It's going to be fun. And the week after, when Nathan should be back, I'm going to finish this little series essentially getting on to how God provides for these people and what He gives to them. And I think essentially it gets to a question of contentment. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe I'm on the completely wrong angle here, but I think in our world today, there's a lot to be said about our attitude, about our complaints, about how we deal with change and uncertainty, and how we find contentment in the middle of all that. You see where all that makes sense? I hope it makes sense. It makes sense in my head, and that's probably the problem. So that's where we'll be. So Exodus 15, just to let you know, is the big celebration and worship service because God's just done the unthinkable. He's parted the Red Sea. The people haven't even got their feet wet, and they're free. That nation that has enslaved them is destroyed, absolutely dismantled. But we know that within 3 days, the complaining starts and the cycle begins, right? Today, we're a month further on into the desert, and not much has changed. Things have just got worse, okay? And it seems like, on some level, like God's got it in for them. Like God's dragged them out of slavery, but He's got it in for them. That's the way they're thinking. So this is the beginning of Exodus 16. It says, the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin. Now that's not a wilderness of sin. That's just a short version of Sinai, but we'll explain that in a second. Between Elim and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 15th day of the second month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. There too, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. Listen to this. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. I love that word, moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all this bread we wanted, but now you have brought us into the wilderness to starve us to death. Notice how their complaining's now turned full circle. So back in late August, as things started to warm up in our backyard, we had a visitor, and a photo of that visitor will probably appear on the back up on the screen there. I was in the middle of trying to repair some grass that our guinea pigs had destroyed, and I didn't mind that we had this visitor. You know, he was okay. He just came and redistributed some of my backyard for me, and I put it back, and we just had this little sort of on and off thing happening there for a little while. Essentially, I decided that I knew best. It was my house, so I decided I should know better. I should know what to do here rather than you. So I just decided to stick a couple of big branches on top of his mound one day just to see what happened. I didn't know, but I would have a war in my hands very shortly, because the bush turkey turned vindictive, essentially, and he decided that to start digging up some of my newly watered grass and dirt. So it was war, right? It started. So things escalated from there, I think, as you can imagine. I brought the tarp out and covered his mound and just said, "Here, try that one on for size." A friend of mine bought me a couple of big sort of like wire pieces of sheeting, and we sort of like fencing sheeting, I guess, and we sort of put that down over the grass to let it grow, so he couldn't scratch it. And my friend also bought me his slingshot. I am happy to report that the bush turkey problem has been solved in our backyard, and I will let you speculate as to how that might have occurred. But I guess what started out as a bit of fun turned into a war. Like this whole thing, it was okay at the start, but then it turned bad. And I guess I just wanted the old days. I just wanted the peace and tranquility in my backyard back. I didn't think that was too much to ask. I'm pretty sure many of you guys have that backyard place where you sort of, you know, I just want this to feel like it's mine. And because surely God owes me a good backyard. Surely God owes me a good and safe and easy life, right? And I wonder if it's the same mindset for the people of Israel as they, you know, we thought this freedom thing would be pretty good. We thought this freedom thing would actually work out to our benefit, and it's ended up turning bad on us. This is not how God should work. And I think this is the issue. Here's the issue of the whole thing. The key issue is, where are the people looking when they try to make sense of what's happening in their world? Because I think when faced with all this change and all this uncertainty in their lives, they've got an option. They can either look to the God who brought them freedom in the first place. They can look to the God who has brought them this far by his grace. They can look to the God who has provided everything, even though it hasn't been perfect in their minds up until today, and has promised to provide for them tomorrow. Or they can get stuck here thinking that all I can see is the challenge in front of me. Okay? And I guess the thinking today is when God seems distant and life doesn't make sense, where do we look? And where do these people look when all this stuff's going on? The first place they look is backwards. Verse 3 says, "If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. We sat around with pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted to." You can understand the mindset, can't you? Now, here's the thing. The event they probably remember with some fire and a bit of food has probably been blown out of proportion. It never actually happened this way. It's just that moment that a few of them remember, and it was like all of a sudden it's become the memory that just is the thing we can't shake. It's that moment where everything made sense, but it's not realistic and it's not accurate. It's probably like that guy, that fisherman who comes home and says, "I caught this fish and I just missed it, and he was this long," somewhere in that spot, right? They had this idealistic version of how life should be, and things just aren't making sense for them. And it's probably a moment, I think, where a small group of people remember something, and now it's over all this time, it's reached this legendary status that they recall, and they want to just go back to the way it was. Here's the problem. The problem with trying to spend all our time in the past is what happens is we remember the one solitary moment that life made sense, and we forget the 400 years of slavery. One of the questions I get asked quite commonly is, do I like being a pastor, and do I miss the police force? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. I do miss it, because there were some days there where you made a difference and some days where everything worked. But what you forget is the other days where you wish you'd never gone to work. You selectively omit all the things that made sense, and you're like, "Oh, I just wish I could go back on some level." And that's not good. That is not wise. We convince ourselves that the past is where we should be, and we never move on with God to here, today. We never actually get anywhere, and we just get stuck. Now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? We're in the middle of a situation where there is significant change in the world, and we either want to go back to the way things were, or we try to see what God's trying to do today. Some of you are hanging out for the day where you can do hugs and handshakes and stuff, right? And some of you are like, "Please God, no." You're right. So some of you, I guess the danger with looking back in nostalgia and thinking about ourselves and all of what's going on now is we tend to ignore the God who provided for us then, the God who provided for us today, and the God who promised to provide for us tomorrow. And can I just make a point? Like, looking back is not always bad, right? Looking back actually makes a lot of sense sometimes. If you look back to maybe understand yourself better and your background and your emotional, all that sort of thing, that probably makes sense. If you're looking back to understand history and our world and just to get a better concept, that's good as well. If you look back to remember what God has done, it will inevitably lead you to a place of worship, won't it? Because you'll look back in gratitude at what God did and go, God's been here the whole time. But if you look back with the sinful attitude, which is the world exists to serve me, what you will find is that it's very easy to get wrapped up in a place of discontent. And church, that is exactly where Satan wants you. That is exactly where he wants you to get stuck. And I'm just struck by this idea that the people attempted to turn back to find something for today, and God invites them just to look up. God just invites them to look up. And all of a sudden, when you look up, you realise that God provided for them yesterday, God is here today, and that provides hope for tomorrow. Things make sense when you look up. Second thing, we get stuck in the uncertainty, right? We get stuck in the uncertainty. We must understand how difficult it must be for these people to transition from a way of living that has lasted 400 years, where they've never had a day off, and all of a sudden they're free. Now that 400 years of slavery must be terrible, but it does provide a normal. It does provide a sense of stability, and this is what my life sort of is. Transition now, a month later, they're now essentially nomads. Today, when God says move, we move. In 2 days later or 2 months later, when God says stop, we stop. Can you imagine how annoying that must be? It would drive me nuts. It would drive me absolutely crazy. Imagine the conversations around the dinner table. I wonder if the next place will have a school for the kids. I wonder if the next place will have room for the goats and the bush turkey and the pets and everything else. I wonder if in the next place we go to, whether there'll actually be income which I can support my family with. I wonder if tomorrow God knows what he's doing, essentially, is the question. If I can go back to my bush turkey story for a moment. When I was having that fight with the bush turkey one morning, there was a day I remember where, and we're just going to have a little fun with this, so it's okay, right? There was a day I remember where essentially I chased the bush turkey out of my backyard twice in the morning. I then drove the kids to school, and as we dropped the kids off at school, there's a bush turkey at the school, and I'm like, and then I drove to work, and and there's a I opened the blinds in my office, and there is a bush turkey digging in. The only thing I can see is that blasted bush turkey. Now, I know we can have some fun with this, but isn't it always the case when you're in the middle of that problem is the only thing you can see? It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you live or what the situation is. That problem that God hasn't resolved for you is the problem that you can see everywhere, and it's disconcerting when God doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. It's frustrating. And the waiting and the uncertainty never seem to end, and it surrounds you. And the temptation on a human level is just to escape, just to get out and get away and just make that problem go away. Now that's okay, and it's completely understandable, and it's how my mind works too. Or it can be the moment where we turn our eyes back to where they should have been the whole time. This is what I've learned. Notice that God is ever present, and this is the moment that he decides to speak. And he says in verse 4, look. I wonder if there's something in that, just that word, look. I understand, kids. I understand. It'll be all right. Look. I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much as they want for that day. Notice that in those 3 words, I think, and I'm not going to read the rest of that verse, in periods of change and uncertainty, what's God trying to do? God is trying to teach us reliance. And it's hard, and I don't like it, but that's exactly what he's trying to do. And I guess the question is, why? The question is, why in times of uncertainty doesn't God just find a solution and fix it straight away and make life easy for us? And the answer is, God sees the bigger picture. If you look at the bigger picture of Exodus, the next chapter after all this stuff happens, they walk into a war zone and they don't know how to fight. After that, they walk into another obstacle that they don't know how to fix. After that, they walk into another problem they don't know how to solve. And here's the thing, if they don't learn to trust God today, they'll never accomplish anything for him tomorrow. Church, if we don't learn to trust God in the moment right now, we'll never get anywhere tomorrow. And probably we'll find ourselves in a position where we wish we'd actually learnt that trust back there. And I reckon that's the challenge. I reckon that's the moment, because God sees the bigger picture. He knows the battles that yet come in our way. I reckon the tragedy of this story, in the bigger picture of things, is that essentially a journey that should take 2 months maximum takes over 40 years and most of the people never make it. And I think it's because they're so focused on surviving and so focused on this problem that they can't see God in the middle of it. They can't see what God is trying to do and what he's trying to prepare them for. And that's as hard for me to take as it probably is for you to hear as well. They miss the fact that God's got bigger plans, and God uses change and uncertainty essentially as an invitation for us to keep our eyes focused on him. I want to read a quote that really changed my perspective on this. And it now is on my whiteboard in the office, and it'll probably stay there for a while. God shows us he cares by not just giving us what we want, but he uses what we want to teach us to want him more. I don't like that one. That one challenged me. God shows us he cares by not giving us what we want, but using what we want to teach us to want him more. I reckon the key for God's people in this moment where they find themselves, and the key maybe even for us today in the middle of change and uncertainty, when we could spend our time looking back, or we could spend our time worrying about today, the challenge is to spend our time as an invitation to pursue God further, today, now, not tomorrow, not putting it off. Jump in today and start. That's what I think the people get wrong. I think it's one of those lessons that we need to learn as well, that there is only certainty and God is the one who provides it. He's the only one who can provide the certainty you're after. I'm just going to finish with a couple of words from Philippians 4, and I'll start here in 2 weeks' time when I talk about contentment. But I just want you to notice. Remember our friend Paul. He's sitting in a prison cell. He's sitting in a prison cell, surrounded by uncertainty, surrounded by a world of change, surrounded by the fact that all of a sudden he can't go out and do stuff for God like he used to. He can't go and live the way that he thought he would, and yet this is what he says. Now, I want you to take notice that the key to this whole thing, the key to this question is, where is he looking? Just notice this. I have learnt how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live with almost nothing or with everything. I have learnt the secret of living in every situation with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or with little, for I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. He has his eyes fixed on Jesus, and it changes everything about how he sees his present. I just think that as we face the intersections today in our life, those little moments where we choose to trust that God's in it, or that he's forgotten us, the invitation for us is simply this, church. Stop, slow down, center our thoughts on him, knowing that in our God's hands, our past is gone, our today is okay, and our tomorrow is secure as it gets. And the most important thing in today is that we learn to trust the God who has tomorrow sorted as well. Let me pray for you, hey? God, I just want to pray, God, for the people today. God, maybe even for all of us. Like we essentially are in a time of change. We're in a time of uncertainty. We're in that place where it'd be easy to think you've got it in for us. It'd be easy to think that just everything's gone wrong and we don't know what you're trying to do. And God, maybe the answer this moment is that we look to you. We've been singing about it all morning. God, I look to you. I will love you. And God, that's the place where we want to start this morning as a church. We want to just come to that place and acknowledge, God, that in the middle of all the stuff that's going on in our life, that you're there, that you care, that you understand, and that we can bring our feelings and struggles and uncertainties to you. And all of a sudden, when we find you there, it doesn't feel so big. It doesn't feel so big. We thank you, God, that you are a God who is just as good in the past and is just as good today as just as good you'll be tomorrow. And God, we just want to take this little moment just to fix our eyes back on you where they needed to be the whole time. Amen.